All right, it's a brand new month, a brand new week that it is the 4th day of the month of February 2024, 5 rather. Welcome to it. You're tuning into the NewsDesk right here on television where we inform, impact and inspire you. Plenty on the go for us as we are going to try to make sense of everything that has been making news headlines and everything that you have been talking about. Speaking of that, we're going to begin with the diplomatic showdown where South Africa and the United States are at odds again. This comes amidst Donald Trump, the president of the US, coming out saying that they're threatening to stop funding and aiding in some parts of the African countries. We unpack the reality of these claims and also what the government has to look into and what would be those implications that would come ahead of this conversation. And then later on, we are going to be going into the AfricaInView as I'm going to be joined by our African news editor, Shawn. He's going to be here as we try to make sense of everything that has been happening within the African continent. Not forgetting that the EFF is challenging South Africa's deployment in the DRC and also Nigeria's crackdown of homeless children in Ghana. And then, of course, we look at Trump's renewed military focus on Africa and how this is shaping up the whole of Africa. Definitely, we are going to be keeping you in focus into that. And then as we wrap up the show later on in other news, Some Sense joins us as we break down everything that has been trending stories, everything that has been happening, especially within lifestyle and entertainment news. Not forgetting that Lesedi's FMs, but Tukada is on suspension and Beyonce making a world record, winning the album of the year in the Grammys. You don't want to miss that conversation and a whole lot more coming up within this hour. But let's bring you the poll question that we are asking you this evening. The poll question has to be centered around Donald Trump. The question that we are asking you is, do you think Donald Trump's action towards South Africa threatening to cut aid over land reforms are justified? You had a few options there, and your options there is yes, he is protecting the U.S. interest. No, it's unfair interference. Or again, you can say Africa needs to stand, and also again, not sure. We need more you might need more information about this, right? That is the poll question. I'll give you the results before the end of the show as the show continues, right? A whole lot for you to unpack. So let's get straight into it. First up, we go behind the headlines as we dive into the deep stories of the day. Without wasting time, this is the Tuesday edition of the NewsDesk. Reporting live from Johannesburg, Soweto, I am Kagiso Sithole. It's always a great pleasure to be in your company, and even this evening, we're tracking down all the stories that have been making headlines and every story that you need to know. And today, we are starting off with a story that has been in everyone's lips right here in South Africa, knowing that the president of the US, Donald Trump, has threatened to cut funding for South Africa and also its policies. This comes after the land repatriation act that has been signed by the president of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa. This also is forming into regarding and also taking land from the people that have owned the land before. It's not the first time that Donald Trump has had something to say about Africa, but this time South Africa is directly in his crosshairs. Last month, Parliament passed a bill allowing the expropriation of land to address racial disparities in land ownership. This comes after, as you know, that since apartheid, many of the people that are supposed to be having the land, which is the minority, those who are disadvantaged, still do not have that land even in 2025. One of the most controversial topics in our country's history, but as expected, Trump jumped into taking the true social media to accuse South Africa of doing terrible things horrible things and threatening to cut the US aid. Of course, he provided no details and of course the evidence that comes into it. And this comes after a whole lot of video and speculation that comes as journalists in some parts of the US were asking him about these terrorist heights and these tariffs that he's been sending. This is a video by Sky News Australia, and this is what his words exactly.
across other African nations, and why South Africa?
It's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
On the Fed Chair Jerome Powell.
All right, that is the president of the U.S., Donald Trump, just reiterating some of the words, talking about the fact that there's a horrible things that have been happening within South Africa, and which is not true. Some of this is allegation, because even with this land repatriation, act is something that has been done into making sure that land goes back to who deserves it. Let's separate fact from truth into this. First of all, how much aid does South Africa actually receive from the US? Definitely we need to find out that, because even the Minister of Mineral Resource, Gwede Mantashe, came out to saying the fact that if they do not want to aid us, we are not going to give them the resources that they need, because it's all about the resources that we have been giving out to them and everything into making sure that our economies are running as smoothly. According to official figures, the US provides approximately $8 billion annually in various forms of assistance. Most of it is directed towards health programs like the PERFA, which funds the HIV and AIDS treatment. If Trump pulls the plug, millions of South Africans rely on ARVs treatment could be affected. I'm trying to make sense of this, is that Trump is willing to cut funds in making sure that people who are reliable and reliant on these ARVs treatment in us fighting the HIV and AIDS strain in our African continent, that he is willing to cut those funds, and he is willing to definitely make sure that this un-humanitarian move into taking humanitarian things that are supposed to be benefiting the people of South Africa, which shows that there's still a lot that needs to be done in making sure that the US and South Africa come together in making sure that these people who definitely need to get these aids work together. The US President Donald Trump has said that he will cut all future fundings to South Africa over allegations that they were confiscating land and threatening to remove some of those lands. And this is what Vincent Mwenje, the presidential spokesperson, had to say in an interview with DW News in regards to their reactions to what the president had to say.
No, we are a sovereign country. We guided by its own constitution. We believe that the new, or rather the amended Expropriation Act is in line with our constitution, which does provide for the expropriation of land for public usage and in the public interest. And therefore, there is no need for us to change any course. We believe that the Trump administration and President Trump in particular have been misinformed about the intention of this act. They've also been misinformed about the true spirit of the act, which does, in accordance with the Constitution, provide safeguards for those property owners whose properties are targeted for expropriation. The Act provides a detailed process that has to be engaged, and it's not private property that the Act is talking about. It's unused land which can be utilized for public purposes, and the end of the process, the Act says, must be equitable and just. Therefore, there has been unnecessary fear-mongering from certain right-wing quarters out of South Africa that have deliberately distorted the intention of this act and have been fear-mongering.
Accept that.
All right. That is the president's spokesperson, Vincent Mwenje, just reiterating the fact that this is not us taking land from people that it belongs to, but it's land that is not of use, and we are trying to use use it for public use. And of course, this comes after knowing that South Africa comes from the apartheid, and a lot of black people couldn't access lands for them to build businesses and do certain things. And even now, AfriForum, the DA, also come out to saying that this appropriation might be discriminating the minority, which is the whites, and which is where the land belongs to in South Africa. And Julius Malema's EFF's leader also took out a press briefing yesterday, that is Monday, the 3rd of February, and this is what he had to say when it comes to land expropriation and these allegations that the US President Donald Trump had to say about South Africa.
Policy is the expropriation of land without compensation, and we make no apology about it. It's actually our first non-negotiable cardinal pillar. And the Expropriation Act, as signed now recently by the President, is nowhere closer to that. If anything, it tries to justify the compensation, that properties can be expropriated, land can be expropriated, but there should be compensation, and condition of expropriating such is that expropriation should be in the interest of the public.
All right, that is the EFF's leader, Julius Malema. They're just in a press briefing that he sent out yesterday, the 3rd of February 2025, just to reiterate the fact that he has always been standing on the fact that this needs to happen, the land expropriation, and he has been very vocal about it, that the land expropriation needs to happen, and the land needs to definitely go back to the people that needs to be going back to. In a podcast by Sizwe Walush, Whilst Mpofu, he had some statements that he had to reiterate when it comes to, this land reappropriation bill that has been sent up, and especially by the Constitution. This is Sizwe Mpofu, who is one of the political analysts and commentator here in South Africa. And this is some of his remarks that he had to say when it comes to this.
Not being used. And the owner's main purpose is not to develop the land or use it to generate income, but to benefit from appreciation of its market value. So, okay, you can only get no compensation if, among other things, you're not using the land. Okay, how is that crazy? Like, why do we just need a whole bunch of land that's not being used or being held for speculative purposes? Why do we need that to lie empty or unused when we have an entire population that is hungry for jobs, hungry for food, hungry for economic opportunity? That is completely normal, unless President Trump and Elon Musk have a problem with unused land being used by the state. And no compensation for that. I don't see why there should be a problem. So that's one of the narrow purposes. But
Right. So that is one of the narrow purposes, as he did mention there, of this act that we are seeing, that it does describe and also explains some of the things that needs to happen. If you can see there, it also reads there that it may be just equitable for a nil compensation to be paid where the land is expropriated in the public interest, having regarded to all relevant circumstances, including but not limited to where the land is not being used and the owner's main purpose is not to develop the land or use to generate income, where where an organ of state holds the land that is not using for its core function and is not reliably likely to require the land for its future. So definitely this is some of the remarks that he's been saying about this land expropriation, and this is what Elon Musk had to say regarding President Cyril Ramaphosa's response. And President Cyril Ramaphosa in a tweet says that South Africa is a constitutional democracy that is deeply rooted in the rule of law, justice and equality. The South African government has not confiscated any land. And then Elon Musk replied, coming to say, why do you have openly racist ownership laws? Right? It seems as if that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have a problem with this Expropriation Act. I don't know what are your thoughts around it. However you view it, I want to hear your thoughts, because the question is, how far will Trump go? Will he follow through, or is this just another political stance as he prepares for his term, as he's sitting in that Oval Chair? Or what does this mean for SA and the US relations going forward? However you view it, please go onto all our social media platforms using the hashtag #TheNewsDesk. All right, let's move on to this story that we are bringing you. Another story that has been shocking waves and has been making news this morning. It definitely has to be the Rea Vaya bus that has been been suspended this morning. This comes after last night in Soweto, multiple Rea Vaya bus drivers were targeted. Suspension of services. This comes just 1 week after the coordinated SANDF attack. All right, we apologize for that network glitch, but I was just reiterating the fact that it has been spoken about that this comes after that last night in Soweto, multiple Rea Vaya bus services were targeted in a shooting, leading to the immediate suspension of the services. This comes just a week after the coordinated SANDF attack saw 51 PATCO buses torched across Mpumalanga. A coincidence, should we say, about this? It also leads to us connecting the dots to try to make sense of this. Is that when will this violence end, especially when it comes to bus drivers, when it comes to also people who are taxi drivers who want these buses to be removed from these lines and routes that they're going. I mean, just last week we saw 51 buses from the PATCO services being torched in Mpumalanga. Now we are seeing that last night in Soweto, 2 of Rea Vaya drivers were gunned dead, and the people are trying to still see what these allegations are all about. And as we all know, that the taxi bosses were named as possible suspects in the PATCO assassination attacks. So the question here comes to saying that, will this taxi turmoil end? Because we see that this is not only happening within the bus coincidences. We are also seeing it happening in a lot of public transports, such as the Uber and Bolt services, that the taxi drivers are fighting for this. But it is still allegation at this point to saying that they are the ones that are still involved in this, but the taxi operators are saying the fact that they are not part of this. And if this is the case, what is the government doing about it? What is the government doing to pull these stops? Because this is something that is not starting today. It's something that has been happening, where we are seeing a lot of taxi violence happening due to the fact that they feel threatened that this new transport is trying to take their routes. Because remember, when Rea Vaya started, it was the same incident. Even now we are seeing that even 51 others services have been taken into account there. And as we are talking, we are seeing that these buses have been suspended, looking at the fact that they are trying to keep their drivers calm. They are trying to keep their drivers protected as we go into this. But in a interview with SABC News, the MMC of Transport, which is Kenny Kunene, was reiterating the fact that these buses will come back tomorrow after they have settled down everything and have found out what is actually really happening and who is behind these assassins, who is behind this shooting and everything that has been happening there. And we are going to be trying to give you a snippet of what the MMC had to say, and this is what he had to say. Let's listen in.
We are saddened by this barbaric act. But it is clear from the reports that we have that this was a well orchestrated hit. This was an assassination. I understand that where we are now here at Mapeta, next to Mapeta Secondary School, this is where the first hit happened at 8:30. And when you look at the distance between here and the second area where the second shooting happened, which is next to Kuro College in Protea, it takes about 9 minutes. So they hit here at 8:30, and I think it was about 8 bullets that were shot. The driver was shot whilst he was driving. When the bus got stuck, they came to finish him. When the paramedics arrived, he was still alive, but he died on the way. And when you look at Protea, 17 bullets were shot. So there's a clear assassination. We don't want to speculate. We do not know why it happened. We will allow the South African police services to do the investigation. We understand that 4 people have been arrested who were in the vicinity of the shooting, who are Lesotho nationals. The police are not yet sure if they are the culprits, but they're investigating. I understand that they found an unlicensed firearm in their possession, so they are investigating. But
that is the MMC of Transport here in Gauteng, the city of Johannesburg, that is, Kenny Kunene. Just reiterating the fact that, there has been 4 people arrested in connection with this, but the police are not sure about this. But another thing that he iterated was the fact that these services are going to be tried to be brought back tomorrow. So if ever you are a passenger that has been affected by this, tragic incident that happened in Soweto, Protea land, you definitely might find yourself wanting to use other alternative transport services throughout the rest of the week until this is all clear and until we have a final say to saying that these buses will definitely return tomorrow. But the bigger issue here is that public transport in South Africa is broken and commuters are the ones paying the price, whether it's trains, it's being stripped from metal scraps, as well as buses being burned or taxis being involved in these turf fires. We definitely need to find a way into making sure that, we do not find ourselves in this cycle, because this is a cycle that has been continuing for years and years, where we are seeing, people from the taxis wanting to take over the routes that have been taken into it. I want to hear your thoughts around it. What are your views? What are your comments about this? Were you the ones that are affected by this incident that has happened? Or do you think that you once have been affected by taxi disruptions and bus disruptions? Drop your comment and leave your comment there for us to make sure that we do hear what you have to say into that. That is, that was happening in Soweto there, where we saw multiple Rea Vaya bus drivers were targeted in a shooting, leading into the immediate suspension of bus services. This comes a week just after the coordinated assassin attacks that saw 51 Padco buses that were burned down last week in Mpumalanga. Investigations are still continuing, as you heard the MMC there of Transport, Kenny Kunene, just reiterating some of the words there. I wonder what are your thoughts on it. I wonder how you view it, but definitely we'll keep a closer eye on it and a closer look for you to try to make sense of everything that has been running down there. Right, another story that we are keeping track for you definitely has to be something that has been running throughout the course of the last week and again this week, where we are seeing that the SANDF that has been sent into the DRC. After today, we've heard that the Minister of Defense, Mwenje, was in front of the Portfolio Committee in Parliament, just trying to give off answers of what she had planned in making sure that the repatriation of these bodies have been done and are being dealt with. The Democratic Alliance have called the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Mwenje, to urgently brief Parliament on the deteriorating calamities situation in the DRC, where 14 soldiers were killed in actions and many wounded in the past 2 days. And that is what we are seeing, definitely. And today, the Minister and the Deputy Minister were in front of the portfolio committee of in the parliament, and the chairperson there, Melusi Gigaba, was there trying to find out sense of everything that has been happening. And as I was listening into this press briefing, a lot of the member of parliaments were asking and attacking the minister on how does she sleep at night, and which is one of the questions that she even asked to, saying that I am not here to answer how do I sleep or how are my sleeping patterns. What I'm here to answer is the plan for South Africa, is the plan on how to reinterpret these bodies to come back into our country. And definitely she did mention the fact that the bodies will be coming back into the country as of tomorrow. All those 14 soldiers that died in such a terrific, tragedy that is happening there in the DRC. We'll get sense of it all more as we step into the African View, as Shawn is going to be joining us in a short while. But this is some of the proceedings that happened today as the minister and the deputy minister were answering questions in front of the Parliament Portfolio Committee. Let's listen in.
The South African National Defence Force resigning. You should resign today. And when are the rest of your generals who are playing golf at Copperleaf while our soldiers were dying? When are they going to resign? Those are my questions. I expect answers.
There's a point of order. There's a point of order. Point of order is?
What is the point?
Chair,
One earns respect.
we cannot
One doesn't
allow
demand
a member
respect, Minister. Your
Honorable,
behavior
pointing
doesn't
someone.
earn respect.
No. Chair, don't allow this.
honorable members,
Because we're able to point others.
There's never a dull moment in South African politics and the parliament as well. As you can hear in some of these audios that they were having conflict with themselves. I remember just at around, 5:15 when the chairperson, Melusi Gigaba, was trying to wrap up this conversation. And he even reiterated that this is where we need to come and address the problem and not attack each other as members and portfolio committees that is sitting there. And the public is definitely listening to us as we're trying to reiterate, the points and making sure that these SANDF's people have been repatriated. As I did mention, that the troops are going to be sent back into South Africa, as their families are going to try to bring, or rather lay them to rest after they have fought a good fight for the country in the DRC. Even though tensions arise upon the Rwandan President Kagame and the President of our country, Cyril Ramaphosa, definitely the bodies of the 14 SANDF soldiers who were killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo last week will be brought back into the country tomorrow. That is the statement from the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Minister Angie Motshekga, speaking there. Right, as we wrap up behind the headlines, let's bring you again the poll question that I'm asking you this evening. I'm asking you, do you think that Donald Trump's action towards South Africa, airstrikes, funding cuts, and threats over land reforms might definitely, be justified? You have four options there. Yes, he's protecting his interests, and no, it's unfair interference. Africa needs to stand its ground, or not sure on. We need to know more. If you are not sure and you still need to know more about this, don't worry, you are just in time, as we are going to be going and shifting our focus, looking into everything that has been making headlines within the African continent, looking at the fact that Donald Trump is definitely attacking Africa as it is, and of course the Nigerian country is definitely looking into some not abductions, but some of some hostages that we are seeing there. And definitely Shawn is going to be here to try to make sense of it all as we step into Africa in View. Let's step into it. focus onto the African soil and the African continent, just to make a sense of everything that you have been talking about and everything that has been big. I mean, a lot has been happening within our African region, and definitely, of course, it needs to be everything that has been happening within the DRC. Shawn is here. Shawn, very good evening and welcome to the News Desk.
Good evening, Kagiso. Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much. It's not a good time for us to be chatting, as you all know that 14 soldiers from South Africa have died, succumbed to the fatal injuries that happened there in the DRC. Let's talk about what has been happening in the DRC and how is this shaping, the African continent. Are we seeing, Africa rising and fighting against each other? What are your thoughts on this?
I think it was a sad sight to see when we saw the South African soldiers succumb to the injuries that they faced in escalating tensions in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo as the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels sieged the city and captured the town of Goma. Yeah, and these escalating tensions even saw many casualties that include UN peacekeepers, hundreds of thousands of displaced Congolese to refugee camps, and even just farther west, and even the vandalism of embassies in protest of that in the capital of Kinshasa. And with that in mind, it is just a sad sight to see as we see, powers in East and Southern Africa, come to each other's necks, come at each other's necks. It is not a great sight to see. And even with the ethnic undertones and the ethnic strifes that are to be reconciled, it is still something that should come to an amicable solution as early as it can be found.
Definitely, Shawn, it's as families that are affected by this. It's not just them going and fighting for the continent as well, but it's families here. And today, the Minister of Defense was appearing in front of the Parliament, and she was answering questions. And a lot of members of the Parliament were asking her that, do you think that our soldiers are not trained enough to fight such fights?
This is in reference to South African soldiers?
Yes, in reference in Africa in general, because I mean, this fight does not only affect only South Africa, but even other troops as well who are involved in this.
To some degree, some points can be fairly raised about how prepared some forces are to fight in the DRC, whether it comes to de-escalating tensions or even otherwise just dealing with what is terrain that is very unique to that part of the continent with regards to the densely vegetated tropical jungles that are there. These are terrains that, for example, the Rwandese defense forces are much more familiar with, the Ugandan defense forces are much more familiar with, and so on and so forth, as the most densely vegetated regions of the African continent actually are in the heart of Africa, being Eastern DRC and much of what is basically just above Lake Victoria as we know it. And even in spite of that, even terrain aside, to some degree, you could also argue that there is some concept of inexperience with regards to perhaps no military force within and amongst African leaders has emerged as, so tall enough to enforce and bring down its will on others. Some may say that may be for good, but in times when you need to settle the score and there needs to be a clear leader working towards an amicable agreement, as actually President Kagame lamented, saying that there was no emergent leader setting out the way forward. That happens to not be the case amongst African countries and their military.
Speaking of Kagame, he was talking a lot of that, South Africa has been sending out a lot of misinformation when it comes to that they are not funding the M23, But let's talk about the fact that will this ever, are we seeing rather a full scale of diplomacy when it comes to South Africa and Rwanda?
I think there are sites of something of a breakdown of diplomatic relations, although there is still cause for hope. For example, President Ramaphosa and President Kagame, although they constantly and have accused each other of misquoting the other or misrepresenting what the other has said, there's hope to be seen in the fact that they are still talking and they're still having conversations despite their differing interpretations of what is happening on those phone calls. It was sad to see the DRC and Burundi boycott what was the session held by the East African community that was chaired by the President of Kenya, President Ruto, citing what they felt was a bias towards Rwanda from the President of Kenya. However, there is a joint East African community and Southern African Democratic Development Committee meeting this week in Arusha, I think, in Tanzania, that is said to set the stage for what will be the path that is taken forward for this conflict that has drawn in powers, has drawn in attention, has drawn in even militaries from both the eastern and southern parts of the African continent. And I hope there may be still hope in sight for what is a peaceful resolution to this conflict.
Some analysts have been saying that this is all about money, power, and resources rather than sustainability. Your thoughts on this?
Yes, so it is a dance. It is in some ways, because it talks about part of the resources that are being fought over are resources in pursuit of sustainability in an energy transition towards, for example, electric vehicles, a lot of batteries, things that are very reliant on resources that are found in large amounts in the Eastern DRC, relating to coltan, lithium, cobalt, and so on and so forth. And these are the kinds of things that are essential for us to move away from the use of fossil fuels and things such as that. So even in the pursuit of sustainability and in the pursuit of a green future, there's a lot of calls to be seen as to whose necks are on the line in the pursuit of that, and at what will the powers that be and the stages at which these agendas are set, who are they willing to collateralize in the pursuit of what they deem to be a climate emergency, but how is that to be reconciled against what is clearly an increasingly emergent humanitarian emergency?
Still a whole lot that needs to be done, and I hope our leaders are not going to be just focusing on just resources and the finance, but as well as sustainability, because we need to sustain our continent. Speaking of the continent, tragic things are happening in Nigeria. According to reports, thousands of children have been detained by the state of religious police, who claim that these children are linked to crime and extremism. Shawn, what do you think is really happening there in Nigeria?
The truth of the matter is Nigeria has faced increasingly dire economic outcomes in the last few years. And even had been the site of countrywide protests in August of 2024 with regards to the rising cost of living. And these children, many of which have basically found themselves with no place to turn. And in Kano, the northern part of Nigeria, is amongst the most arid parts of the country, neighboring almost the Saharan desert as it is. And with that, there obviously would be food would be hard to come by, and it's a really sad sight to see what is happening to the children as they are basically being subjugated on account of the lack of resources. To some degree, there is a point to be acknowledged in what is often can descend into antisocial behavior on account of being found in such a vulnerable and destitute position, and they find themselves having nothing to turn to other than, for example, crime and or radical extremism that is northern Nigeria has found itself struggling to combat, especially amongst its young populace. So it's not a good sight to see at all, but also there's a lot of competing arguments on account of the developments being made.
Definitely very sad developments that we are seeing there. I mean, we've seen rises of groups such as the Boko Haram in past years and stuff like that. Do you think that these also involve these groups, terrorist groups that are growing? Because some analysts are saying that the root cause of this is poverty, the lack of education, and also government failures.
I think both assertions are correct, actually. So I think the young adolescent children are only found in these positions on account of systemic failures, for example, that lead them to have, lack of education, lack of access to essential services and food and so on, such and so forth. But it is these failings and it is these shortcomings that are then exploited to turn them towards extremism, as these extremist groups are some of the few people that will offer them a semblance of community, a semblance of purpose, especially when they have no other viable paths to pursue with regards to education, for example. And on account of that, make them turn to violence during what are very formative periods of their lives. So actually what tends to happen is that it becomes these it becomes a sort of cocktail that is concocted to turn these young people astray.
Definitely, these young people need to be kept safe. I mean, my question here is, where are these children being taken to? Are they getting any kind of support? Another question that rises is this just a case of mass detention without solutions?
Yes, that's actually a very good point, because from what I could see, there was no point to whether the detainees would be whether it would be for a purpose of rehabilitation or mitigation of the issues that they were facing. And to some degree, it even felt like it was punitive, as if they were being punished on account of their lack of food, their lack of education, and so on and so forth, something on which they are actually not at fault for. But I think to some degree, maybe the government and the relevant administrative officials in that region feel as if that is the best they can do, whether it is they rot or maybe are left to be in detained camps rather than left to roam the streets and even turn to worse. But it is extremely sad to see that that situation or that dilemma even has to be confronted in the first place.
Definitely solutions need to come in handy, because these are the future of our continent that we definitely need to take care of. And speaking of the future of the continent, let's move to our final story, where Trump is definitely taking guns and shooting shots within African continent. And South Africa is not even, separated from this, as we know that this week Donald Trump came out to saying the fact that there's a whole lot of stuff happening in South Africa, especially when it comes to the land expropriation bill that came out. Before you give me your thoughts and remarks onto this, what he had to say, I want us to listen to the exact words that he had to say.
The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination. And until such time as we find out what South Africa is doing, they're taking away land, they're confiscating land, and actually they're doing things that are perhaps far worse than that.
Okay, and
all right. So it's not only South Africa, Shawn. Somalia is also in this. And Lesotho also came out to saying the fact that they also want their land back. So what are your thoughts around what Trump, these allegations that he has been sending out?
I think his attention undeniably has been turned to this situation on account of a man, a billionaire that some credit a lot for his success. The recent owner of the now social media platform named X, once Twitter, Elon Musk, who has made his thoughts clear on all things to do with, for example, white farmers and so on and so forth, as a South African-born man himself. And I think on account of the patronage of Elon Musk, Donald Trump's head has been turned to what has been honestly surprisingly respectable attempt starting towards land reform in South Africa. and obviously it has been met with protest. But I think to some degree, protest, although it is not welcome, although I frankly think it is unfair and unjustified, it is nothing new, because in other attempts that have been made in the past in other countries, as you mentioned, even in the past, yeah, the world and the Western world, what they like to call as the international community, often, yeah, met, for example, attempts made by, for example, Robert Mugabe with much more hostility. Yeah, even attempts made by the fallen ruler of Uganda, Idi Amin, for example, with a similar level of hostility, perhaps for other reasons in that respect. But in this case, that is nothing new to be seen as far as this is concerned. But nonetheless, I would actually beckon President Ramaphosa and the ANC party not to falter on account of this, because at the end of the day, Trump seems to be cutting funding in all directions. So at the end of the day, whatever funding he's holding ransom may go anyway, in spite of any decisions the administration may take. So I think they should just carry forward and rectifying the injustifiable and land reform, land distribution that currently sits within South Africa.
It's very interesting things that he is launching military operations. At the same time, he is also abandoning aid for the very same people that need to have this aid. According to official figures, the US provides approximately 8 billion annually in various forms of assistance that goes across the African continent. With his strategy, do you think that Trump's strategy for Africa tells us more about his leadership and where he places Africa in his future plans? Because I'm looking at the term that he's going to be spending, the 4 years that he's going to be here. Does it mean that Africa and the US won't have quite, amazing relationships?
I think with regards to Africa and with regards to much of the world, Trump and his administration seem to be content to throw us to other world powers, other competing patrons, for example, China and the rising middle powers in the Middle East that have found their way into much of East Africa, for example, the Turkeys, the UAEs, the Egypts of the world. And with regards to the cutting of aid, now their interferences with local legislation, I think that is now also on account of not only abandonment, but also antagonism. But also with antagonism and abandonment, you're also going to find yourself with a newfound independence that you had not found before, because obviously all the aid that was received did come with its own stipulations, its own conditions, yeah, its own behavioral prescriptions. And to some degree, we will be relieved to be free of that. Though hopefully, as far as the critical programs that they were tied to, the countries will be ready to step into this newfound responsibility to still care for those who are in need.
Definitely, those who are in need to be taken into account. Slow_jam30 says, do we really need the USA? Before you answer that, some sense underscore the vibe saying that that one is trying to kill us. It's that's it. Imagine canceling aid for newborn babies. That's demonic. What are your thoughts around this? Especially, what Slow Jam is saying, that do we really need the US?
Simple answer, short answer is no. Although at the end of the day, there are some ways in which they had entrenched themselves into very crucial services that even Somerset laments there. For example, with regards to a lot of AIDS relief, a lot of maternal relief, and so on and so forth, that now they have heartlessly cut abruptly. Yeah, although they do call it a 90-day freeze, we have to also prepare for ourselves for some of these funds that will not be returning after the 90 days elapse. Yeah, and yes, it is heartless, it is unfair, but it is no reason. It is, I say, we look on the other side and take the chance that's been given to us to chart our own path, a path free of being entrenched and being betrothed to the US's whims, and not be at their mercy once again in the future.
definitely there's a lot that needs to be taken into consideration into making sure that our continent is always economically stable, even though the US is saying that they want to cut ties with this. Our Minister of Minerals and Resources, yes, Gwede Mantashe, was saying the fact, because there's an Africa mining indaba that is happening, and he was reiterating the fact that, you know, since Donald Trump was to cut funding for us, that means that as the African continent, we also need to cut resources that we are sending them to the US. What are your thoughts around that? Do we think that if they cut their funding, we should also cut our resources that go to them?
I think I've seen murmurs of that conversation happening. I've seen murmurs of the tit for tat happening across the board. I think it is something to be explored, but something also to be weighed carefully. To some degree, I think yes, it should be seriously considered. But also, as we have said, some people have already been made collateral on account of Trump's actions. And to some degree, if we were to match the same towards the US and towards the Trump administration, even more people may be made collateral. For example, the people whose livelihood depend on said minerals and materials going out. Yeah, so I wouldn't do it on the account of just simply to be petty, but if it made sense, and if the sum of it, the math of it made sense, it's not something I would shy away from. But it's not something to do just on account of, an eye for an eye to make the whole world go blind.
I'm on an eye for an eye at this case, because like you cannot be just coming to us just like that and you still want to be demanding resources from us. Shawn, it's always a pleasure to have these conversations pertaining the African continent. As always, the other week, bi-weekly again, you'll be joining us here as we try to make sense of everything. Thank you so much for your time.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much indeed. That is Shawn, our African news editor. As we continue the discussion around, the DRC, and Nigeria is cracking down, of the kids that have been taken away from the streets, as we know that they've been detained. And also, again, Trump's growing involvement in Africa, which seems to be something that has been taking rounds and something that you guys have been talking about. And speaking of that, the poll question that we are asking you today has definitely 4 options for you. Do you think that Trump's action towards Africa's airstrike, funding cuts, and threats over land reforms are justified? Yes, Trump is protecting U.S. interests. No, it's unfair interference. Africa needs to stand its ground, and not sure, need more information on this. However you view it, please go into all our social media platforms, or you can even go on our story and make sure that you answer that poll question, because just before we end the show, I'm going to be giving you the poll results there and everything that you need to know. Right, you are up to date with everything behind the headlines, everything that is happening within the African continent. Now let's bring in our lifestyle and entertainment editor, Sam Sent, as we go in other news to try to make sense of everything that you have been talking about and everything that has been making social media buzz with your hashtags on In Other News. Definitely, we have unpacked hot-hitting headlines, but now it's time for us to switch gears and get something that has been making waves within the social media platforms and also the entertainment world. And of course, I'm not alone. And joining me is our lifestyle entertainment editor, is no other, Sam Sent. Samukelo Makamo is here. Samu, welcome back on the news desk.
Sanbalan. Hello, everybody. Hello, Kagiso. It's always a pleasure. When I'm here, it's time for the real tea.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking hashtags. We're talking celebrity dramas. We're talking everything that has been buzzing on the socials.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get them.
And indeed, social media has been buzzing, some sense. A lot of stuff that has been happening. But let's start locally. I want to know about this nigga that has a big laugh on our radio station. Batukada, banned from Lesedi FM, right? Batukada has, according to report, his real name, who is Nyakalo, was expected to co-host the Monati Breakfast Show in December, but he didn't show up. Now, management is apparently blocking him from returning to the airwaves. Samu, what is going on there?
Kagiso, listen, this is a classic workplace tension meets ego clash. Word on the street says his colleagues weren't exactly sad about him not showing up. His absence didn't mean anything to them, apparently. Because, to be honest, they say Batukada is bigger than radio. He's got his hands full. He has a football team, the General FC. He has a business, and he's sometimes on TV. So people feel like he is outgrowing the station.
And I don't mind you being a busy person or being a big figure and all that, but what happened to just informing us that, guys, I have a meeting? But if a man applied for leave and was supposed to return, why the drama? Some sources say that there's jealousy brewing in the station, with some executive allegedly wanting him gone. Some, do you think that this is just about him going AWOL, or is something deeper here that is going on?
Kagiso, personally, 1.1. This is deeper than what we think. This is deeper than what we think. The man misses the show. Now he's fired. Just that, but Jay, like you said, we should be responsible with our jobs and communicate with our bosses. Yes, that I get. But I feel like this is a power move. Let's forget about Batukada. Let's not forget that Batukada is one of the biggest names in Soweto radio. He's been since, like, some of us know him from childhood. So I don't know if Lisedi is ready to lose Batukada and risk losing their listeners.
Tough one, because I know he has been there. I'm old now because I've been listening to him and his infectious laugh that we all know. But the big question here is this a justified punishment or just a corporate politics? However you view it, what do you think about this? Should Batukada be brought back on the airwaves? Go into all our social media platforms and let us know that, is the management doing the right call? Drop your comments there on the comment section, right? Let's move on to our final story that we are tracking for you. Definitely going further afield, the Grammys that we saw coming out the past weekend, and also knowing that, our very own Trevor Noah was making a fifth appearance as the host there. But something that is besides Trevor Noah, Beyonce came out finally winning Album of the Year. I remember on Friday's Scoop with the Juice, you asked the question, some to say, will she take this? Your thoughts on this?
Okay, come on, you pretty little jeans. She made it. Finally, man, guys. So let me tell you, the beehives are celebrating. I don't want to lie. They are celebrating. Pretty Little Jeans is one of my personal favorite Cowboy Carter too. But they also saying, y'all had not been looking enough. Beyonce has been snubbed many times from getting this award, many times from Lemonade, self-titled, Renaissance, but now Cowboy Carter finally got to top the prize. And let's not forget that this is a country album. I think that's the whole purpose why she won it. Remember, most of the time, historically, we've been seeing white dominating the genre. The genre of thingy, what's this? Hey, why is it running away?
Genre, yes.
Country music,
yes.
Country music. So this has been something that has been dominated by white people, because I know Taylor Swift always takes this home. So I think this was a culture statement for Beyonce, and the Grammys noticed. And I don't know, whoever advised Beyonce to go country made waves for her. Because now look at her, after so long she has been missing the chance of getting Album of the Year, and honestly speaking after getting country, and it worked for her. So I think people are more into culture and things that involve their cultures and all that. I think that's how Beyonce snapped this and managed to take it home.
Let's talk about how she dressed in her speech. She literally thanked Linda Mattel, one of the first Black country singers, acknowledging the struggles of Black artists that are facing in the space. I mean, Donald Trump is just accusing us as South Africans that we are trying to take the land from the white people. I don't know what would be his remarks when it comes to this as well.
Kagiso, to be specific, she mentioned the first black country singer. So I think that was a big inspiration to a lot of people who want to move as Trump, guys, man, as Trump and live our lives. Because now he's gonna drive us crazy, and we are a crazy nation. And we won't stop talking about it. We'll be bashing him the whole year. So let's just move. Country music has not only been welcome in the black communities. This is why Beyonce won the award. This is a historical move. But also, can we talk about how Taylor Swift has 4 albums of the year wins, and nothing has been done about that? We are fine about it. And now, because Beyonce got this, I know there's gonna be people still talking and saying what. Especially, I'm not trying to be racist, especially the white people, because they feel like country music is theirs. So let's make sense. Make sense out of it.
It's
If
like
we try making sense out of it.
It's like Holy Ray winning the best Mapiano album of the year. That's how people are looking at it. But however, black people, we thank you that you are taking a march and making it on the list, right? As we wrap up this conversation, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? Because I'm feeling that there's been a lot of tensions, especially racial tensions, that are happening in and around our borders, that people are fighting against. There's always the first black, there's always the first what, but we never, look into the deeper root of these things. Slow underscore Gem 30 saying that you guys forget that she's from Texas and she must excel as well, because some of these people do not even see the fact that you are from that neighborhood and you deserve to win that category. I don't know your thoughts and sentiments around this. Oh, I'm seeing Samu's network there becoming a challenge there. All right. However, because of time, we've come to the end of the Tuesday edition of the News Desk, and that's how we wrap up the Tuesday edition of the News Desk, right? And we have talked and packed everything that has been breaking down, all the headlines that we need to know, pressing issues in Africa and beyond the borders, wrapping it off with Somerset J, where we just lost his line there, talking about everything that has been trending, everything that has been making round. But the conversation does not stop here. You can definitely go onto all our social media platforms and make sure that you use the hashtag the News Desk and engage in all the conversations and everything that we have been talking about this day, especially looking into the racism effects that we are looking into. But another thing that you do not want to miss is the Thursday edition of the News Desk, as we are going to be taking over by the Political View, as we are going to bring you the extended version of the Political View. The SONA 2025, as President Cyril Ramaphosa will be addressing the nation first time under the government of national unity. What are your thoughts around it? What do you think that the president should be definitely looking into? I'm going to be joined by our resident political analyst, Tebo King Mazola, and a panel of sharp political commentators who'll be joining me as we break down the State of the Nation address, giving you the pre-analysis, the live coverage, and also the post-speech background that you've never missed before. Make sure that you do join us on Thursday, not at 7:30, but at 6:30 until 8:30 p.m. 2 hours of everything that is SONA 2025. You don't want to miss all on that. Is it crime, economy, education, however you see it? Make sure that you do join in the conversation and do join in the conversation right here, right? That's it from me, Kagiso Sithole. Thank you so much for joining me as we tackle everything that has been hitting hard in all our nation and beyond our borders. Make sure that you do join us again on Thursday. Stay informed, stay educated, as always, stay questioning. See you on Thursday. Until we meet again, look after yourself, take care, and good night.